Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today we're going to be painting my version of Monet's Water Lily Pond, and I'm going to be sipping on a little Merlot, and I'm excited to tell you that there is a special reason why I'm painting this today. So, after posting Irish Hillside Cottage a couple of weeks ago and receiving some great feedback, I decided, I should look back on another trip I took overseas for more inspiration. So a couple of years ago, I took my father backpacking through Europe. Yeah, that's him dancing, which was something he's always wanted to do, and one of the countries we visited was France. So when we were there, I did a couple of open-air paintings at the Eiffel Tower, which was a whole lot of fun, and I actually posted one a while back. However, my favorite part of France was going to Monet's garden in Giverny. Although it was a dream of mine to do an open-air painting there, they wouldn't allow anyone to set up an easel and paint on the property for obvious reasons. So the place was absolutely beautiful, and I loved walking around for hours, taking probably 1,000 photos. And this painting is inspired by one of the photographs that I took, so I really hope you enjoy this painting today. So let's get painting, let's get sipping. All right, so for the materials today, I'm gonna be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 canvas. You can certainly switch it up, the size, but that's what I'm gonna be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. The colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, green oxide, burnt sienna, which I'll call rust, Mars black, fire red, and chrome yellow. And of course you can switch up the colors, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using 3 brushes today. I'm using a 1/2 inch wide bristle brush, a number 8 round brush, and a number 1 round brush. And I'll refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. You're going to need a cup of water for washing your brushes and a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I'm going to be providing you with a couple of resources. One of them is a link where you can purchase this entire kit with the exact materials that I'm using, same colors, same brushes, even the same fancy palette that I use. So that's down there. There's also a link where you could download a image of the final painting. So that's free to you. You can just download it and use it as a visual reference, as well as written step-by-step instructions. And that's all we're going to need today. All right, so what we're going to do for the first step is we are creating a black background for the majority of our canvas. This is going to provide us with a great base to build our painting on. So we're going to be using our large bristle brush, and we're going to be using black paint. Pretty obvious, but sometimes I have to say everything. So what I'd like you to do first, if you're painting along with me, is we're going to make a mark about the halfway point up at the top of our canvas. We're going to make a mark over from the left-hand corner, maybe about 2 or 3 inches, maybe somewhere about there. And then you're going to come down maybe about, 2 or 3 inches and make a mark. And then you're going to make yourself a messy line like this along the edges. And then you're going to come down to the bottom of your canvas. And in the left-hand corner, I'm going to make a mark. And then about 1/4 of the way over from the right-hand side, so maybe about 3 or 4 inches, I'm going to make a mark. Between those two, I'm going to come up about halfway into my canvas. So you can just kind of look at your canvas and come about halfway, maybe a little bit lower, maybe about 1/3 of the way. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to connect that dot to the end here, and then this dot to the end here, and this whole area in the middle you're going to paint black. So you just get to sit here and do a nice relaxing step of painting your entire canvas black. Some people like to paint the edges of their canvas, so as you're going along, if you want to paint the edges, feel free to do so. When you get to the where it's meeting this edge, just keep a messy edge. You don't want to have a clean edge. We want it to be on the messier side. You do not need a perfectly covered canvas. If you've got some little white speckly spots that don't get covered, don't worry about it. We've got so many details that are going to be going on top of this painting that those little spots that might get missed are really not going to matter all too much. And I'm going to just kind of keep going along here. I'm so excited to do this painting, so I'm just speeding through this little initial boring black stage here, or black step. I am, as I'm doing this though, I am concentrating and making sure that my paint is on the thinner side, because I don't want this to take too long to dry. So I do kind of paint out any really thick spots that I might have, so that way it does dry on the faster side for me. So when I go to build my additional objects and layers, this black will have dried for me. And again, it doesn't matter if you get it 100% covered or if you use a different paint stroke halfway through. It really, as long as you have some kind of layering of the black paint underneath there and it's a nice even coat, it doesn't matter what paint stroke that you're using. And I'm just kind of finishing up here, making sure that I've got all of my thick spots painted out, make sure I've got the majority of the canvas painted. And then we are going to use the same brush for the next step, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it in preparation for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting the last two sections open on the canvas that represent the sky and the sky's reflection. So I'm going to be using blue and white, and I'm going to have my sky darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, and my reflection is going to be darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. And I know that we just painted the black background, but you want to make sure that the edges where it meets your sky are dry. So you can either, take a little break already, start some sipping or something. You could blow on it, or you could just grab a blow dryer and dry it if it's not dry. But I'm going to start with blue and white on my brush. I don't have a lot of blue because I want this to be a nice, bright, light summer day. And as I come down that sky, I'm going to start picking up a little bit of white. So what'll happen is my sky will naturally get lighter and lighter. And you can bump it right into that black area, so that way they kind of look like they belong together or they're working together. And then as you come down that sky, just keep picking up a little bit of white, and it will naturally get lighter and lighter as it comes down towards the tree line. And then I'm going to, on the water, it doesn't matter if you start at the bottom of the water or the top. I'm going to start at the bottom just because I like to blend from dark to light. It just makes it a little bit easier for me. So I just picked up blue with whatever white I had on my brush. And now I'm going to continue to pick up white. And what'll happen is my reflection of the sky is going to get lighter and lighter as it goes up that canvas. And I'm just kind of overlapping that black a little bit. This is the water, so it's going to be okay if they bump into each other. That's the intent here, that they actually look like they belong together. And just imagine this to be a beautiful summer day. There's not a cloud in my sky, or at least in this little section of the sky that we're seeing. And I'm just going to kind of keep working my way up towards the top of the reflection. So I just keep on picking up white, so it gets lighter and lighter as it goes up that reflection. And we are going to switch brushes to our medium brush after this step. So once you've got this beautiful reflection, and it doesn't have to be like a mirror image, it could even have little ripples in it, so don't worry if it's not exactly perfect blend, but you just want to have the whole thing painted in. And then again, we're going to switch to our medium brush for the next step, so you can get that out and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting some tree trunks and the reflections, and I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm using are rust, yellow, white, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to make a couple of markers so I know where I want these to be. And then if you run through wet black paint, which you probably won't because I instructed you to dry it after the last step, but I only dried around here, so I have a little wet black paint. It doesn't matter because we're using black anyways. So I want these to be like a really nice earthy color, which is why I'm using the rust, the yellow, white, and a little bit of black. I'm going to put all colors on my brush at the same time, but the dominant colors are definitely going to be rust and yellow, and then I'll just pick up just a teeny bit of white and a teeny bit of black. So I want to make some markers. So the first marker that I'm going to make, I'm going to come up my right hand side of the canvas about halfway, and I'm going to come in about 2 inches, and that's going to be my first marker, somewhere about here. And then I'm going to go to the left of that, maybe about, I don't know, an inch, inch and a half. I'm going to make another mark straight up from here, maybe about 2 inches from the top of my canvas. And then this one I want to be a little bit shorter than that. Those are going to be my tree markers. So now I'm going to paint them in. These are just tall, straight kind of trees. I just want this right one to be a little bit wider than the left one. So this one's going to be a little bit wider. And if you can't see it enough, add a touch more white. That's going to help it pop out a little bit more. So I just added a little bit more white to mine so I could see it. And then I'm going to do this one, which I want a little bit more narrow. And if it's too yellow, add more rust. So you can really just adjust this color to how you see fit. Then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to skip about an inch, inch and a half. And I'm just going to do this light streak down into the water. Same thing with this one. I'm not even going to really care if it's perfect. This is going to be the reflection of it. We just need a good placement. And then we're going to switch brushes to our small brush. So once you get your tree trunks in place, you can put your medium brush away in your water cup and take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to paint for the next step is the wild grass behind the bridge. It kind of is around the pond too. So we're going to be using our small brush. The colors that I'm using are green, yellow, white, and I'll use a little bit of black at the end. So I'm going to load my brush with green, white, and yellow. Of course, I said those in an odd way, but you got the gist, I'm sure. And I'm going to come up about halfway between my sky and my reflection, and I'm going to come up in this the peak of my reflection about halfway, and I'm going to hope it's a little bit higher than this. If it's not, I'll bump it up a little bit, but I want it to be a little bit higher than that trunk. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a messy line, horizontal line, that's going to come about halfway between my mark and this tree, so maybe somewhere about there. So I'm going to go messy, 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 left to right, and then I'm going to flick up some pieces of grass. So I want these to be about half the height between my sky and the bottom of them. So this is going to give them good height that we'll be able to see them behind the bridge. I like my grass to be messy. So does Monet. his garden, he built this garden, so he had something to paint. So there's all kinds of wild pieces of nature throughout this garden, which is super cool. So I am, again, yellow, green, and white, and when I get done, what I'm going to do is pick up a touch of black, and the black is going to help to make like these little shadows. And now I've got to do a reflection similar to what we did in the trees. So I'm just picking back up green, yellow, and white, and I'm going to come about an inch or maybe a half of an inch below it. And what I'm going to do, I don't use a lot of paint in my brush, and I'm just going to kind of do these little streaks. You don't need to do the same flick. You just want to give it the essence of this grass. So if you have some long pieces, pull a couple down longer. Otherwise, you just kind of rubbing your brush or making these little streak type brush strokes on that. So that's going to end up being the reflection of the wild grass. And then we're going to use our large brush for the next step. So when you get this done, you can, sorry, I see some bright spots, so I would just add a little bit more white. When you get done with this step, you can wash and dry your large brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to use our large brush, and we are painting bushes along the pond's edge underneath these trees, and we're also going to paint the back trees in this area. So the colors that I'm going to be using are rust, green, yellow, white, and black. So I'm going to use a bunch of colors. I kind of want this to look muted. I don't want it to be overpowering. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start with just a little bit of rust, green, and just a teeny tiny bit of white, like a teeny tiny bit. And I'm going to use this as kind of just getting my bushes over here in place. I want them to be at the start right here where the grass meets the reflection. It's going to, excuse me, kind of wrap around. A little tickle in my throat. I might have to sip a little bit to get rid of that. I'm going to kind of wrap it around here, and then it's going to kind of go off my canvas over on this side. I want to leave a little bit of a gap between the bushes and the reflection, and I'd like the bushes to be brighter at the top. So I'm going to have a little bit more white at the top. So here I go. I'm just going to kind of give myself a little bit of a roadmap right now. So I'm lightly dotting, you know, something along this nature. I'm going to pick up a little bit more green so I can kind of, I don't like it to be super systematic, so that's why I've got it kind of going as an uneven top here, and I'm going to have it bigger over on this right hand side than it is there because that makes it go farther away. Now I'm picking up a tiny bit of black because I still have those bright colors on my brush, and this is going to dull it down as it's coming down towards the water's edge. And I'm just really kind of dabbing it. I'm not really doing anything fancy here. I just picked up a little bit more green, maybe a tiny touch of yellow. I don't need a lot of yellow. I don't want it to scream brightness here. I really want it to stay on the darker side. And then I'm just going to kind of make sure I've got that there. If it's too bright at the bottom, just make sure that you keep that bottom nice and dark. And then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm going to use the remnants on my brush to create this really distant, out of focus kind of trees back here. So I want this whole area kind of towards the right side of my grass to the left and at the same level. So I'm just really sporadically, I'm out of paint really right now. So I just picked up a little bit of green. I know with the dark background, this is going to be such a nice, subtle kind of accent to the painting. It's not going to overpower it. It's going to give us some information that there's some trees back there, but it's not going to be overwhelming, and it's not going to take away from the beautiful flowers and the bridge and all the other stuff that we're going to be doing. I do want to make sure I've got something along the edge here so it doesn't look unpainted. So I've just picked up a little bit more green and rust and just making sure I've kind of fully executed the painting around the edges there. I'm not painting it 100%. I have hardly any paint on my brush right now. And then we are going to switch brushes to our small brush. So once you get this all nice and done, you can put this large brush away in your water cup, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're doing next is we are painting the bridge. We're going to be using our small brush, and the colors we're using are blue, yellow, and white. So this bridge is green, but I don't want to use this earthy green because it doesn't represent the true color of the bridge, and the true color of the bridge is just beautiful. So I'm going to try and emulate it with my cobalt blue and my yellow, and it's this really vibrant green. So I've got it, I'm pretty close. I might add a tiny bit of white to it. I know that I'm gonna add some of that white when I'm painting it, but right now I'm just going for this really vibrant, alive green. I think Monet just wanted colors in his life. He loved to paint colors and all kinds of vibrant, alive things. That's why he built these gardens, so he could have something to paint. All right, so where I'm going with this is I'm gonna start over on the right-hand side of my grass, and I'm gonna end up about halfway between the end of my grass and the end of my canvas. So I'm gonna just make a couple of markers. So I'm gonna make one mark here and one mark over here. And I'm gonna go for it with an arcing motion. So I am gonna put a touch of white on my brush also. I didn't mix the white in my green, I'm just picking it up. So that way, when I go to paint this line, I'm gonna have varying shades of the green. I need it to arc, so it resembles a bridge, but I know that I need two more railings on it, so I can't go too high. So I'm only gonna bring this about, I don't know, a third of the way between the bottom of my grass and my sky. So maybe somewhere about here. It's not going to have a huge arc to it. So here I go. And I'm going to keep my eye on the prize, which is the other dot. Some of you might go from left to right. Some of you might go from right to left. Doesn't matter. If you can just kind of keep it as a consistent arc, that would be great. So here I go. I am going to start my arc for my bridge. I'm going to go right on top of my grass. I'm keeping my eye on the prize, which is the other dot. And there we go. So I have my first mark, which is great. That's always the scariest one. I do know that this bridge, the bottom piece of it is the thickest or the tallest. So I am going to thicken this bottom line by just pushing my brush a little bit. So that way it is thicker. When I go to do the other two railings, I will not be pushing so hard, so they end up a little bit thinner. So here I go, I'm gonna start the other two. Now the other two, they're just gonna follow the same curve as this. You want them to stop at the same place as this one did. And you don't need them to be more than like a quarter of an inch away from this one. So if you can kind of just follow your first mark, just don't press very hard with your brush, you'll get a nice slender line. And if it doesn't end up perfect, don't worry, you can always make little corrections here and there. I have to put my head back sometimes, hopefully my head's not getting in the way of the camera. And I'm just gonna I go slow at this, you can obviously tell that. I'm just picking up some more white and green for the next one. So the next one's gonna be about a quarter of an inch away from the first, well, from the second one, I guess. Would help if I could count, right? So I walked over this bridge once, maybe twice, but it was on the same day. Oh my God, it was such an incredible feeling to just, I almost felt like I was walking amongst royalty. Like I felt like I was in the master's domain. So those of you who might have some kind of admiration for Monet, if you ever have the opportunity to go to this magical place, it's almost like an artist's dream. How could some artist have enough fortune that of course he created on his own to create this beautiful sanctuary that all he needed to do was walk outside his door, and he had all of this beauty to just look at and paint and use as his muse, and it's just an incredible thing. So once you've got those three railings, now you've got to make the posts. So I start in the middle, and I am going to just try and keep them equally spaced apart. And if I run out of room on the end, then I can extend those if I need to. I'm still going with my original green plus white on my brush. The trick here is just to keep them vertical. Our eye tends to play tricks on us when we're doing bridges and such, that it makes us want to start curving them with the curve of the bridge. So if you can avoid doing that, you're one step ahead of most people. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you get this step all nice and done, you can wash and dry this little brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for this step is we're gonna do the reflection of the bridge. So I'm gonna use my small brush again, and I'm gonna use the pre-mixed green that I have, and I'm gonna use just that first, and then I'll add little bits of white into it. But when you're doing this, the biggest trick is to make sure you put it in the right spot. And I emphasize that because you already have a reflection of the grass, so it wouldn't make sense to put it way down here. You have to put it kind of in the same place in relation to the grass reflection. So that's where I'm gonna put the bottom one. So I'm going to kind of start over here. I'm using the darker green so that way, without the white initially, so that way if I want to make any modifications, I can certainly do so. And this doesn't have to be clean. It doesn't have to be as perfectly executed as the top. So I did one. I'm gonna, oops, I guess I had a little bit of white in my brush on that one. I'm gonna do two, and then maybe my third one. You just wanna give the illusion that there is a reflection of that bridge in the water right now. So that way, and it's in the correct spot. So you don't wanna make it too much farther than your grass reflection. And when you get done with this step, we're going to change brushes. I'm doing the posts right now. That's why I slowed down and couldn't talk at the same time, because I need to make sure it is right below the actual posts. So you can see I'm just kind of going up and just making one little mark coming down. And that's all I'm going to do for my reflection. We're going to change brushes to our large brush for the next step. So you can wash and dry your large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna be painting next is the flowers that are flanking our bridge on the left and the right. So you're gonna have to bear with me on this one because these are my own interpretation. I'm kind of improvising these flowers because when I went to this place, there's literally thousands, if not, there might even be 1 million different types of flowers in this garden. So there's different kinds everywhere. There's different bushes of various stuff everywhere. So when I went, I took 1 million photos myself, and this is just kind of my own interpretation and kind of mashing all of the beautiful thoughts that I had into this one painting. So I'm putting my own flowers flanking this bridge, this iconic bridge. So I'm going to be using a red, white, black, and maybe a little bit of green too. So how I'm gonna do this, I want them to be pretty vibrant at the top, but then as they get towards the water, I want it to be more of that subtle kind of look that we were doing over here. So I'm gonna start with red and white, and I'm putting a little bit of red and a little bit of white on my brush. And this is gonna kind of give me these really bright pops of color right at the top. And again, I'm improvising these. They don't have to look like any particular flower. I just want these pops of color on the left and the right, and I want them to be about as high as the bridge, if not maybe a little bit taller. I also know that because I have such a dark background, they will probably get a little bit darker as they dry. So just know that that's gonna happen. And I do like them to kind of overlap the bridge a little bit and maybe hide this little corner over here. Before I start getting into the darker colors, I'm going to go put what I want the bright part to be over on this right side. So I'm using a touch of red and a teeny tiny bit of white, maybe a little bit more red. I don't want the white to overpower. I definitely want it to be there, but I don't want it to overpower. And again, I'm using these to kind of hide the edge of the bridge too. I want this one to be a little bit smaller. And then as I get down towards the bottom of the bridge, now I'm going to pick up a little bit of green and a teeny tiny bit of black. And now I'm just going to kind of get this to go darker as it gets down towards that water's edge. Maybe a touch more black here. And I want it to kind of be almost like it's a shoreline kind of area where it's not going to be, I don't want it to be a super straight line. I want it to have a little bit of a curve or a bend to it. So I'm adding just a little bit more green in through here. And over here, I don't really have to worry because we've already got that little bush at the bottom. And then we are going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you get these flowers, you've got good placement on them, you've got enough vibrant colors here, you can wash and dry this brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are doing the remaining reflection in the water before we put the lilies on. I'm going to be using my large brush, and I want to caution you that you do not need a lot of paint in this step. So this is, in essence, just meant to be a subtle accent on the water, in the water, before we put those lilies on top. It does not have to be super accurate, which is why we're actually doing it before we put the bright colors on this tree up here, because I want you to control the vibrancy of it, and I want it to be really subtle and dark, but not black, obviously. I just want, little hints of red, little hints of green, little hints of the colors that we're going to be using in this tree. So the colors I'm going to be using are, let's look at my palette here. Every color on my palette. So, because I know that I'm going to, when I get into this tree, I'm going to be using green, yellow, blue, white, rust. I'm going to be using all the colors. I say black too, because if I go too bright, I can always just kind of pick up a touch of black and get that to help me to control the brightness. I know I want red because that's over here. So I'm going to start on the left, work my way towards the right, and I'm going to tell you the colors that are on my brush as I'm going to that particular spot. We don't really need to worry about this area in through here, but maybe a touch down here, which will represent a little reflection from there. And then this tree will be bright in a little bit, but again, I don't want you to make the reflection super bright. So we're going to really make it subtle. So here I go. I'm going to put a teeny tiny bit of red paint on my brush, like an itty bitty amount. And I'm just going to sit over here, and my reflections, I'm just going to do horizontal lines. So I'm really just taking a teeny tiny bit of that red paint, making a little bit of a reflection. I know that there's green and black up here, so I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just putting a touch of green and a touch of black on my brush, and just ever so slightly, just kind of putting a little bit of that in through there. I can carry this in through this middle section. It's a little bit of green and black on my brush. And you can see I'm not over blending it. You could even have it cross over this little black area if you wanted to. If that makes it look better in your mind's eye, feel free to do so. And I'm just carrying this black, maybe a little rust, because I know we used a tiny bit of rust up there. I just put a little bit on my brush. Key is always keep wiping your brush off on your paper towel too, or the side of your palette. And again, just ever so subtle, doesn't need to be anything fancy. And then I know as we get into this section, I'm going to have some brightness, but you might want to do a little reflection of these guys here. If they are really bright for you, you could certainly take a little bit of paint and just kind of add a little bit of a reflection of these guys. That's going to help the authenticity of it. You could put a spot of red to emulate a reflection of this little flower at the end. And again, less is more. You hardly need any on your brush as long as you're kind of directly below it. You don't need perfect placement, or a mirror image. And then for this tree, I know I'm going to be using blue, green, yellow, and white, and rust. So I'm just going to put all of them colors on my brush. So a little bit of blue, green, yellow, rust, and white. And then I'm going to wipe it off on the side of my palette. And that's going to be my color combination. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly kind of make these streaks in through here. And again, you can hit that bottom's edge. You can always come back and pick up some of this little color combination. Start making some additional streaks. It doesn't have to be 1 stripe, 2 stripes, 3 stripes. Oh, I felt like the count on Sesame Street. 1, a 2, a 3. Sorry, I digress every now and again. Sorry. 1, a 2, a 3. So I'm gonna keep going with this. And again, this is my interpretation of this beautiful landscape. You can certainly make yours as vibrant as you want, but that's gonna be my reflection. And we are going to use this same brush for the next step, so you can wash and dry it and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna be doing for the next step is we are painting our weeping trees. So I'm gonna use my big brush, and I'm gonna be using blue, green, yellow, white, and rust. So when you're painting this, the idea here is you want to still see the dimensions. So don't go crazy and dot it a million times and cover the whole thing, because you want to have some of this black showing so you can see the dimension to it. These weeping trees, they almost look like strings coming down. They're really long and viney, and they have like these tiny leaves coming off of them, which clearly we're not going to paint every single leaf, but we can give the impression, which is Monet's favorite style of painting, which is impressionism. We're going to give the impression of these weeping trees. So how I'm going to do this so they look even more dimensional is when I paint them in my head, I'm going to think of like a waterfall where maybe the water is coming over a rock. So I'm going to have like a bump area. And then when I'm doing these vines that are coming down, I'm going to be making them skinnier as they come down towards the edge. I don't want them to cover up all of this black area. I don't want them to cover up all of my trunks, but I do definitely want some down there, but I don't want them to overpower it. So how am I going to start this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of all of those colors on my brush at the same time. I love starting with my base of all the colors I'm using in that particular step. So I'm using green, I'm using rust, I'm using blue, I'm using yellow, and I'm going to use a little bit of white, and I'm just going to kind of wipe it off on the side of my palette. So I know that's going to give some cohesion to these trees. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start my waterfall coming over a rock, which is going to be this area right here. So this is going to just kind of get my party started, and I'm just dotting right now. And as I come down towards this edge here, I'm going to let up on my pressure, and that's going to allow me to get these skinnier lines. I add a little bit more white to my brush so you could really see what I'm doing here. And I'm choosing to use blue because whenever I look at Monet's paintings, he's so creative and intuitive with the colors that he uses in them, and in nature, the colors that you don't think would be represented in stuff actually are. So even in leaves, leaves are shiny, so they reflect a whole bunch of stuff off of them. Water reflects anything around it, so water can have everything on it. The lilies we're going to paint later, they can have purple on them, or blue, or red, or all kinds of colors. So just know that that's one reason why I'm using, the major reason why I'm using the blue in here. But this is one kind of waterfall, like it's going over a rock. I'm going to start up top here. I'm going to put some more representational kind of branches and leaves. I'm kind of using the corner of my brush and kind of dotting in a loose fashion, coming down in this like waterfall kind of way. I don't want it straight down. I want it to have like a bend as it's coming off of its trunk or wherever it's coming from. I'm going to add a little bit more green, yellow, and white to my brush now so I can get this more more tree type color. You don't need them to all come off in the same direction. I'm going to get some to come over, bend it over in this direction. But again, the main goal is when you get down towards here, you don't want it to overpower this background. These are actually trails that go through his fortress, if that's what we want to call it, or his property. So it's really dark. It's like this really enchanted kind of forest area back there. So you want to keep that kind of mysterious, you know, I'm walking through this enchanted place feel to it. And I do want it to be nice and filled in. So I keep reloading my brush. Like I just picked up green, rust, and yellow. I don't wash my brush throughout this process, and you can see I am definitely leaving some black spaces. I'm kind of building up my colors. I'm going to get lighter and lighter as I come towards the top of it, and you know, I'm making this feel like, you know, Monet has planted it just for me, because he definitely plants. He was good at two things. He was good at painting, and he was a good gardener. I think that at times I'm an okay painter, but I'm definitely not a good gardener. I would have to say my second, you know, talent or skill that I have is perhaps, you know, sipping or something.
Oh, really? Just straight up around the house?
Whoa.
But so I'm just gonna refer to the master at his gardening skills and just kind of follow his lead, and I'll just paint whatever he has planted. But I'm continuing to just kind of build my tree, or trees, so to speak. Maybe this one's got a little bit more coming over here. This takes me a while because I don't want to overpaint. I don't want to mush, mush, mush and have this all turning into one color. I definitely want it to look alive. Maybe the top of it is brighter than the rest of it. I'm going to add a little bit more white to my brush now, just to give the illusion that this top of it is being, you know, illuminated by the brilliant summer sun. And I'm just going to kind of keep going and keep building this. I'm just kind of using the corner, using some dots, maybe little swipes here and there. I don't want to lose the look of it having almost this like stringy kind of effect, or viney, or, you know, whatever other interpretive words that you can think of. I want to make sure that I can still see my trunks. So again, I'm just kind of using the little tip of my brush, just kind of still building this away. It's going to take me a minute or two here to make sure I've got it the way that I want to see it. I love this blue in the tree. When I was doing this painting earlier, I was just watching as this blue just built it. It built it into an impressionistic, you know, type of Monet painting, even though it's not meant to look like his painting. It's meant to look like Michelle's painting. But the blue just adds so much to it for me. It just kind of brings the whole thing together. I'm adding some more rust yellow and white, and I just kind of keep building this until I say, yep, that's good. That works for me. The visual reference works. I can see this one kind of billowing over. I've got these nice, you know, little almost like rope type pieces in through here. So again, just have fun with it. Enjoy this process. And as the paint dries, you can keep adding more layers to it. You can keep gaining, you know, further dimension with the illusion. If you come to a point where you've lost it, where it's just everything has kind of encapsulated the whole background and you're like, oh my God, I can't see any dimension in it anymore, then just let it dry. You know, give it a couple minutes, let it dry, and then you can come back and add some subtle highlights to it or some shadows, and that can bring it right back to life without you even doing too much to it. I want to make sure I've definitely translated these little wispy kind of things coming down. Weeping trees. So a little bit about weeping trees that I know is they love water. So if I had to guess, Mr. Monet had planted these in order to control the height or the whatever the water. If it needed to be, he didn't want the water too high, painting weeping trees next to it would help to drain some of that water. It was probably some sort of ecological control thing that he planted these weeping trees, because they're everywhere around this pond. So I have a feeling that that is why he had so many of them around the pond. And I'm thinking like that looks pretty good. So I am going to be switching brushes to my small brush for the next step. So once you get your weeping tree as weeping as you want it, you can put your large brush away in your water cup, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to be doing now is we are painting the lily pads. We're going to be using our small brush, and we're going to, in essence, we're going to use every color on our palette. And the reason why we're going to do that is because these lily pads are shiny and they will reflect anything around them. Every picture that I ever have taken or looked at of these particular lily pads, every picture is different because it depends on what time of day it is. It depends on if it's bright out or if it's got the time of the day. It depends on if there's flowers popping next to it. So they are all different colors, all different times of the year, every different time of the day. So, which is probably why so these are water lilies, which is not it's not the name of what they are. It's actually a painting that Monet did. It's actually a series of paintings he did. I'm thinking because they look so different all the time. And I don't know if you know, but I think he probably painted, if I'm gonna make a wild guess here, probably about 300 paintings in his water lily series. I'm probably wrong. It was probably like 3. But I think I've seen so many of them, so I'm gonna guess at like 300. But I'm sure somebody will fact check me on that one. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do a series of disc or oval type shapes that are going to be wider than they are tall. They're going to be larger at the bottom and way more narrow at the top. And I am going to just arbitrarily keep switching colors. I'm never going to wash my brush. So right now I just picked up, I don't know, blue, white, and green. And I'm going to paint with a lot of paint. And I'm going to start, and I'm just going to do a series of these discs. So you can, they kind of are in clusters. So when you look at the pictures of them, they do almost form in like clusters, or they kind of trail off with each other. I'm probably going to do multiple layers too, but I'm just going to kind of get them all into shape first of all. I keep switching colors. Like I'm right now pretty going blue, green, and white. I just picked up a little bit of yellow. Usually like one cluster will be pretty similar in color to the stuff next to it. But there are like little ones. So I wouldn't necessarily go like red or rust or anything on this color or black yet, but you kind of want them to look like they belong together because they would kind of be reflecting the same stuff when they're near each other. But when you go into these other areas, as you're trailing off and going farther and farther away, you definitely want to try and make them smaller. Again, I'm still at the moment using the majority white, yellow, green, and blue, but I definitely will at some point soon, probably sooner rather than later, start introducing maybe a little bit of rust. I just picked up a little bit of rust on my brush over here. Maybe these are almost reflecting, you know, some of these flowers over here. Maybe a teeny tiny bit of red, you know, to maybe look, I put red and blue on my brush, make it look a little purpley. Definitely putting some over here. You want to have some on top of the reflections of objects. So you want some on top of your bridge reflection. This is going to lead the viewer to understand that these are on top of the water surface. So that's one kind of key piece that some people miss because they think, oh, that's my reflection, I don't want to touch it. It's too, you know, it's its own thing. Nope, these are lily pads on top of the water surface. So I'm just going to kind of almost ignore the things that are being reflected in my water, and I'm just going to continue to make these pads. I'm going to use a touch of black on my brush. I just picked up a little bit of black. This is going to give me a little bit of gray or maybe some shadows underneath some of them. Again, I'm just kind of floating around, no pun intended, because that's what these are doing. No, they don't float. They're attached, I think. I think they're attached, like underneath the water to like a stem, maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking that might be correct. But I'm adding some more white to my brush, little highlights. And you just want to make sure that you have enough. Every now and again, just step back, you know, and see if you've got a good enough assortment. I want some over here by the water's edge. And I just keep changing colors. Like I have white on my brush right now, and you can put multiple colors on the same lily pad. And my goal is I just want them to look almost three-dimensional. And the only way to achieve that is to have multiple colors throughout them. And you want them to look kind of cylindrical or oval. And they can come in varying sizes again. So I've got some small ones and some big ones, and I've got some little rogue ones. I just painted some little rogue ones that are just off on their own. So, you know, just have fun with it. Keep going back. They can overlap one another. Like you could have a big, huge one that's just in front of another one. So just kind of keep eyeballing what you've got and make sure that you've got a good representation over the entire painting. I want these to be a little bit brighter, so I just added a little bit more yellow and white to my brush. And I don't want to kill the original color that I had down there, so I'm just using this yellow and white as like a little accent. And again, it's all in a visual interpretation of it. So as you're going through this process, you're probably noticing I continue to go back to previous lily pads that I have painted, and I'm just adding these little kind of dabs or dashes of a new color. And you can get that cohesion throughout them if you say, okay, well, I've got a good representation of all of these colors. Now, how do I bring it all together because they look a little bit disconnected? Well, you could just simply pick up maybe green and white, and without over painting all of them, just kind of put a little green and white dab in all of them, and that's gonna tie them together. That will make them look like they've, that they are part of the same species, that they've, maybe they're taking on a little reflection of either the sky or the flower that's next to them. But because you are bringing that same color throughout them, you're giving them a color harmony and making them look like they all belong together. And that even though they have, maybe shedding different light from something, because they have that similarity within them, it makes them look like, they are all in the same pond, or, they've definitely been in the same environment. And I'm just kind of fiddling here, making sure that I have as many as I want. I'm thinking that that's pretty good. It's so hard to stop this step because I know that the more I add onto here, the more fantastic that it becomes. So I'm trying to control myself, maybe just a little bit more white in through these areas. And again, white is a great highlight / complement if you're going through this process and you're like, oh, I like the placement, I think they look pretty cool, but I don't seem to have enough dimension to them. Just pop in a couple of white streaks and that's going to help to give them a little bit more of that natural dimension to them. And again, it doesn't have to be, you can see it's not as if I'm sitting here, I want to highlight there and I want to highlight there. I'm just popping on some little white dashes. Hopefully I'm giving it a little bit of a curve, which is going to give the viewer the idea that it's a little round kind of object that we're looking at, because the pads themselves are cylindrical in nature. And the white just really acts as this beautiful pop of a three-dimensional element. And I think I'm almost done here. I think so. So I am going to use the tiny brush for the next step. So when you've got all of your little lily pads, of course I've got to add one tiny little batch over here by the shore. We're going to use this same brush for the next step, so you can wash it and dry it and get ready for that step. All right, so we have one last major step before we finish this beautiful pond. It's going to be creating the lotus flowers on top of the lily pads. So I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using red and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm using both colors on my brush at the same time. And what's going to happen is I'm just doing these little flicks. For me, my easiest way to make a little lotus flower is I make a little cup, which is going to be red and white, and then I just flick up these little petals that come up from that cup part. So I'm going to demonstrate one or two here, and I'm going to dream a little dream that my pond looks like this. I have a pond. It looks nothing like this. Hopefully someday it will, but I'm working on it. Monet's he's my inspiration. So here I go. I have red and white on my brush at the same time. I think I'm going to put one over here because this looks like a pretty good spot. So I'm going to do my little cup. And the trick here, reload your brush often and don't overpaint. So now I'm just going to kind of flick up these little chaotic little petals. And this also helps to tie the red flowers up here down into the bottom of the painting. So for me, I don't overdo these little lotuses. I don't want 1,000 of them. I'm just going to kind of make sure that I have, a good representation, but I don't, oops, I need more red on that one. I don't want to overdo it. I just want to have a few here and there, maybe to pull the eye around the canvas. As you get up towards the middle or towards the smaller ones, you don't have to do the full on, little cup and little petals. You could certainly just do little tiny dots, red and white dots, as you go farther away, because that's going to give it some perspective. I think that does it. I don't, maybe one more, maybe one right. Ooh, I think I'll put it right here. Right, it looks like it needs one right here. And then we have one tiny step left to go. It's going to be with this small brush, so you can wash and dry this little brush and get ready for the final step. All right, so we are on to the final step, and this is the final step of any good painting, or any painting for that matter. It doesn't have to be good, is to sign it. So I'm going to be using my small brush. I am going to be, I usually sign mine bottom left or bottom right. I think I'm going to sign this one in the bottom left. I'm going to use black paint. I do my initials, but you could certainly do your first name, you could do the date, you could do a symbol, whatever you want to identify this as your painting. And that is going to conclude this masterpiece. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your beautiful impressionistic painting of Monet's garden. And I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.